Right, so I'm going to solve the Skateman problem using Desmos to do the graphing so I can find out the optimal solution for this company. So if you remember, this company, Skateman, makes skateboards. They have two different products that they make and a number of different components that go together to make the part. So different components they have are the deck, which is the piece of wood that you stand on. It uses trucks, which is the part that the wheels are mounted on. Every skateboard uses one deck and two trucks. And then there's a couple different types of wood that they use depending on the skateboard. But each of those is, the wood is made into veneers, which is a very thin piece of wood. They're glued together in a hydraulic press, and that's what's used to create the boards. So the company has two different products. They have the fancy and the sporty board. Those are the two that that use the different kinds of wood. The sporty board makes $15 in profit. The fancy board makes $35 of profit. So we're going to create a graph, create an equation to represent that so that we can find our solution. So I'm going to use X for the number of sporty boards, Y for the number of fancy. So first I'm going to come over here to my setup. I'm just going to add those for labels. This is going to be my X1, which is my sporty, and then Y is going to be my X2, which is the fancy. Right. So there I've got my axes set up right, and like I said, you're going to take 15 times the number of sporty plus 35 times the number of fancy, and that's going to equal Z. And then we'll add a slider so we can slide this up and down to represent different amounts of money. Now, because I've done this before, I'm going to change my slider to go from 0 to 8,000, and it's going to step by 50s. Right, so as I slide that, and we're gonna have to zoom out quite a bit because we're gonna make a lot of skateboards every day. So you can see as you decide you want more profit, I could make the same amount of profit if I make 20 fancies as if I make 44 sporties, right? Or I could make that same amount of profit if I am anywhere on this line. So for example, 28 sporty and 8 fancies would make $700, right? Any number of those. And if I zoom out farther, I could get the same thing for higher production values as well. Right. So that's my profit equation. All right, next is that it does take time to make each of these boards. It takes let's see, it takes 5 minutes to make a sporty, 15 minutes to make a fancy. All right, and they're open for 2,400 minutes. So it takes 5 for every sporty plus 15 for every fancy, and that has to be less than or equal to, well, they're open 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, 60 minutes in an hour. Right? So it's got to be less than 5 times 8 times 60. If we zoom out here quite a bit, we can see that line. Right? Now, it's not possible to make a negative number of skateboards, so I'm also going to add that into my graph. And the way you can add an additional rule or additional equations in the same graph is using curly braces. So shift square brace makes a curly brace, and the x has to be greater than or equal to 0. So that gets rid of everything on the left side of 0. Close that curly brace, and then another curly brace. The y has to be greater than or equal to 0. And so that makes it a lot cleaner to see the graph here, right? And that can be less than or equal to, right? So anywhere on this line, anywhere in the green region is possible. right? Anywhere on the green line will be like using all of your shaping time. So we can find the optimal solution by sliding our profit slider until it's only touching in one place. That'll be the most money. So as I slide it to the right, when I get to right here, I can see the most money that we could make would be $7,200. And that would be to make 480 sporties and not to make any fancies, right? The sporties make more money per minute, so we should make all sporties, even though they make less per product. In 15 minutes, you could make $45 of profit instead of $35 of profit. So make all sporties. That's great, except that when they start to make all sporties, their suppliers say, hey, I can only make 2,800 trucks per month. That comes out to 700 trucks per week, and you're wanting more trucks than that. So we're going to have to add on this new constraint that the trucks cannot go over 700 per week. So remember, every skateboard uses 2 trucks, one for the front, one for the back. So 2 times X would be the number of trucks for the sporties, plus 2Y would be the number of trucks for the fancies, and that's got to be less than or equal to 700, the number that we can get. So you can see here, we could not make 480 because that would use too many. I'm going to, again, clean up the bottom and left side of this graph by adding on these constraints, and I'm just going to copy and paste the curly braces part so that it just stays a little bit cleaner. Right, so what's the most money we can make? Well, we'll take our profit slider and we'll start sliding it back. Constraints always make you make less money, so I'll slide it back until it's just barely touching, and it looks like it's right about there. Maybe a little more right there. The most money you could make is $6,550. And if we find out what this point is right here, it is 285 sporty, 65 fancy. So that's looking great, except that we also have wood. So we need to add in constraints, find out how much of the different types of wood we can get from our suppliers, and make sure that we can actually buy enough of that product as well. So the North American maple supplier says the most they can make is 480 or 840 of those veneers each week. And if you remember, those are only used for the fancy deck. Right? The fancy can do up to 840 veneers per week. Every fancy board uses 7 veneers. So 7 times the number of fancy has to be less than or equal to 840, right? I'm not a big fan of that color black for that graph, so I'm going to change this one to blue. And then I'm also going to add on those other rules that x has to be bigger than 0, y has to be bigger than 0, and if we zoom out, we have to be below this blue line here. So does it make a difference? It doesn't make a difference. We're already going to be using less than that for the North American for the fancy, so no problem at all. But then the Chinese maple supplier also can only make 1,470 veneers. So that's our sporty board, so we'll add in the equation for that one as well. 7 times the number of sporty boards has to be less than or equal to 1,470. So that adds a new constraint here that we cannot make this number because that's too many. So again, we'll take our slider, we'll slide it back until It's just barely touching the region that everything is in. And as we slide it back, we find out the maximum profit would be right here, $6,300. And that maximum profit is to make 210 sporty and 90 fancy. Right, and that's the entire situation. So that's going to be the graph and the answer that you'll turn in for this problem. Make sure that you take a screenshot of your graph for each one of those, and then answer the questions.